I'm Lainey Lamar, and last week we talked about why I uninstalled Google Analytics from my website, but this week I'm going to talk about what I'm using to track my campaigns instead. Can I get an air horn up in here? I love that sound so much. This is Oh My Growth, the podcast for online business owners who want to better plan and forecast their results, but definitely don't want to have to become an analyst to do it, which is cool because I'm like your remote integrator over here, and I handle all that stuff so that you can make all the very boss decisions about what you're going to do to create your next best month, launch, or collaboration. We're talking about Oh My Growth moments, boss, and that's what this whole podcast is dedicated to delivering to you. So let's do this. I believe in being data-driven with your online business decisions. I believe in dashboards. I believe in knowing your numbers. I believe in getting a return on investment for your marketing efforts and being able to understand how those efforts and returns influence each other so that you can improve your efforts and increase your results. What I do not believe is I don't believe you need Google Analytics to do any of this, and I have a couple of solid recommendations to back that claim up. Now, before I uninstalled Google Analytics, and if you want all the reasons behind why I did this, check out episode 53 of the podcast, but I actually tried out a few different privacy-compliant analytics platforms to see how they worked, and I'll be honest, it was a bit of a shock to see my new dashboards at first. They were simple to understand. Really simple to understand. Keep in mind, I was first certified in Google Analytics sometime back around 2012. So we're talking of about a decade of accounting for a lot of information. In fact, Google Analytics collects more than 500 data points on each visitor that comes to your website. And that's often before your page even loads. Look, and I can't name 500 data points, much less use them all. So when I saw how simple, relevant, and effective it could be to hone in on just a few key data points, it did feel a little shocking. I went through a little emotional,
where's the rest of it?
But when you use privacy-compliant analytics, it's a lot like when you go to a fancy 12-course meal with all of these tiny little plates and you're thinking, I'm
gonna need to stop at the drive-thru after this.
Because there's no way you're gonna fill up on these small servings, right? But like the 12-course meal, you realize by the time you slowly digest all of these plates, you're actually satisfied and you got everything you needed. What's more is that you don't need a special training to understand what you're looking at. There's no learning curve or complex definitions. You don't have to learn how to code just to set some flipping goals. And you'll never once wonder, am I doing this right? With my two privacy-compliant analytics software of choice. That is Fathom Analytics and Plausible Analytics. Now, before I get into why you would choose one over the other, let's look at the shiny features they both have to offer and what makes them so much better than Google Analytics as your choice. Both of these platforms meet or exceed the requirements made by privacy laws like GDPR, CCPA, and PEDR. And both ensure that you are compliant with how you're accessing and storing information, regardless of where you're located, where your visitors are logging in from, or what your personal expertise or understanding is about what your privacy obligations are. They take care of all that for you. They also do not use cookies to track your visitors, which means that as more browsers limit the use of tracking cookies, and as you see more privacy legislation increasing and becoming more enforceable with how pixels and cookies will be allowed to be used, you have one less thing to worry about adapting to because you're already using an analytics software you're confident won't be impacted by changes to limiting cookies because they don't use them. Another thing is that Fathom and Plausible are both independently owned, so they have no shareholders or investors at the time that I'm recording this episode. These are software companies that are funded by your subscription dollars, and you, therefore, own the data you collect, as opposed to using a quote-unquote free platform where your payment is actually to solicit the data of your audience in exchange for the corporation offering you this free service. You're paying for it, you own it, and I love that. I also love that both platforms aggregate your data collection, which means that all of the individual identifiers have been remixed as such that you don't have to worry about breaking the law by inadvertently collecting personally identifiable information. Because these platforms, they prioritize you, the client, in the way that they're collecting data rather than putting their own corporate needs first and then burying your obligations to them in the terms and conditions of use for you to just figure it out on your own. You're not even put in a position that this is something something that you have to worry about when you're using Fathom or Plausible. They also don't collect a lot of the types of information that clutter your reports. Instead, they make it really simple for you to be intentional about your marketing efforts by recording your use of UTM parameters. Now, I've talked a lot about those, and I'm going to continue talking about those because they continue to be tracked in Fathom and Plausible. So now that we're getting really intentional about tracking, these UTM parameters, those little tracking codes, those snippets of code that you add at the end of your links to better track your marketing efforts, those are going to become more important than ever so that you can hone in on what matters. And what's nice about the reports that Fathom and Plausible have is that you don't get the type of information overload that comes with collecting and reporting on hashtag all the things. Instead, you're really zoning in on the results you're seeing from your efforts. And I mean, isn't clearly seeing your results the whole point of tracking your dang efforts in the first place? Now, we also have to talk about the dashboards. They both use dashboards that are simple, and your data is straightforward to filter. So instead of getting lost in all the things you could learn about and understand, you can instead take intentional action with information you can easily understand right off the bat. Another great feature that I love is that they both made it really easy for you to include a link to the shared dashboard in your privacy policy, which is like the ultimate in transparency, right? Because it allows you to provide your audience with insight as to what information you are collecting about them. And finally, I know this is a personal gripe of mine. If you followed me for any period of time, you have heard me bemoan this point before. But I disdain the term users to describe people you're meant to serve. And I am tickled pink to report that neither Fathom nor Plausible use that type of language in their reports. Instead, they respectfully refer to your people as, wait for it, visitors. And I love this. So how do you decide between Fathom and Plausible? Well, they both have a trial period. I encourage you to test run both, or you can watch me walk through my thoughts on each of them over on Instagram or TikTok to see them in action, or click on the links in the show notes to play with them yourself. However, here are some key differences that may simplify your decision making. So about Fathom Analytics, it is run by Canadian Paul Jarvis. He is the author of Company of One. I love that book, by the way. Fathom Analytics is a privacy-compliant analytics software of choice for those who have a little bit of tech know-how and for whom it's important to see the dollar figures attributed to their goals. So while your goals and events are a bit more technical to create in Fathom than they are in Plausible, they also allow you with a little bit more customization. So that is an advantage that Fathom has over Plausible. Meanwhile, Plausible is a European-based duo who make Plausible possible by bringing a few more key data sets that you can dig through than Fathom does. So they have things like exit pages and a little bit more in-depth visitor location options. So if that's important to you, Plausible might be the way you want to go. But Plausible also makes it like ridiculously beginner level easy to create goals and events. If you know a domain name, you can create a goal. It's very easy to simply use that URL slug of the page you want to prioritize tracking. Now I know what question comes next.
Well, Blaney, which one are you using?
Well, at the time of recording, I am reporting that I'm in a polyamorous relationship with my privacy compliant analytics software, so I actually have them both installed on my assets. And even with the scripts of both platforms on my website and its assets, it's still like light years faster to load my pages now than it was with that really heavy Google Analytics code on there. That's just bananas, right? But both services are relatively inexpensive. I have annual memberships with them, and the really low cost made it a total no-brainer for a data-loving, privacy-focused person such as myself to want to keep them both. However, depending on how much traffic you're getting to your website, you'll be paying somewhere between $15 to $20 a month for 100,000 visitors, and sites getting less than 10,000 visits a month can expect to pay less than $10 a month. I believe it's $9 a month. Google Analytics may not cost you money to use, but I prefer to spend the price of a nice cocktail every month to be able to toast to the fact that I'm protecting my visitors from being unnecessarily exploited by the data gods. I own the information I'm collecting, I feel confident that I'm not breaking privacy laws, and I have what I need to continue making data-driven decisions. And it is worth noting that while your website analytics may be your main source of information, as this comments on how people are behaving on your website, this probably isn't your only source of information. It's not the only data you're collecting, the behaviors that you're tracking. For instance, your sales pages, your course platforms, your email marketing service, your payment processor, all of these things are probably collecting information that is of interest to you. Likewise, each of your social media platforms will have their own data sets that comment on how people are engaging with you on those platforms before they even click through to your website. You may also be using a Facebook pixel to collect and track data, and there are strategic ways that you could be using that to market a little more ethically as well, but we'll talk about that in a future episode. But I want you to really stop and think. Don't just stare at a screen with all the numbers and columns and spreadsheets and pie charts, donut glazed eyes, taking in more information than you know what to do with. But go analog for a second and think,
what am I trying to improve? And what information do I need to know to make that happen?
So let's say you just launched a product or service, you're doing your due diligence and following up on your results for that launch. Do we care about how our blog posts perform during this time? Maybe at a later date we will, but right now we're looking at the results from our launch, which means we want to know, how did people find my sales page? How many people visit my sales page? How many people visit my checkout, and how many people bought my offer. Now, depending on how your business model is set up, you'll do a whole lot better and go a whole lot further by looking at what your sales page software or your cart payment processor is telling you about your performance rather than your website as a whole. This is the ultimate exercise of honing in on what matters for the results you're looking to achieve. And I personally feel that this is a sigh of relief. We don't have to know and look at all the things all the time. You can just focus on what you're working on now. And if you've grown used to Google Analytics, Fathom and Plausible may seem restrictive at first, but as a reformed cheerleader for the platform, I can vouch for how liberating it is to simplify all of this. You still have to be intentional about tracking your efforts. In fact, it's more important than ever to do so. But I'm here for intentional, and I'm here for simple, and I'm here for ethical. And I'm here for you. So come visit me on social media. You'll find me on Instagram at OMGrowth, that's OMGROWTH, or TikTok at OMGrowthPod, OMGRWTHPOD. And I'm showing you what intentional and simple and ethical can look like for you over there. I'm also dropping some big news early next week, and I cannot wait to share with you, but my excitement and I digress. Look, there comes a point where it's like you have enough and you know enough. You don't actually need that much information when it comes to getting data-driven, but improving a launch or optimizing a funnel or figuring out which eyeballs will be the easiest to multiply. But you do have to be intentional, and I encourage you to consider how you can be more intentional with your digital marketing. And there will be more intentional talks next week because I've got you. I've always got you, and you're my favorite. Bye!